Coleman here from Riverside, who published her Unconditional Love, a Diary of a Caregiver. So she's here to tell us all about her book, how she came to write it, and answer any questions you have at the end.
Okay. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate that you came, and to Tori for inviting me. I am Loretta Coleman. I live south of Riverside on a farm, and the book came about, as they say, things happen for a reason. I took care of my brother first, who had cancer, and he had congestive heart failure. And when he got the cancer in 2000, then I started taking care of him. And that led to understanding, taking care of someone else, dealing with hospice, which I totally adore hospice. Without hospice, I would not have been able to take care of my brother the way I did. They were phenomenal. And then that moved into my parents. We had them move out to our farm, and my father's senility, dementia, whatever you want to call it at that point, started to show more and more. And so my process of taking care of my dad and then my mother's senility, dementia, Alzheimer's also started in too. So over the course of about 11 to 12 years, I was taking care of everybody else, working a full-time job, we're on a farm. And now people say, well, I don't know how you did that. Well, you just do it. You put one foot in front of the other, and you just do whatever needs to be done. So as my parents' health was declining, I had numerous friends coming up and saying, well, my mother is just starting down this road. So she's doing this. Do you have any ideas or anything that you can help me with? So I would give them little tips and suggestions that I had used with my parents. So in the meantime, in about 2010, I self-published this book, and I'm going to give you each a copy of it. It's tips and suggestions. I self-published through Author House back then. And mainly I wrote it for people who were asking all kinds of questions about, around the house, legal things, looking for a nursing home. And for me, fortunately, I had a friend who worked at Allen Hospital in Waterloo, so it went to Allen Hospital. It went to internal medicine here in Iowa City. I sent and sold to various other organizations that looked into it, but I don't even know that it's in print anymore. But it will help you. It'll give you little tips and little suggestions. And so after that one went out, and that was self-publishing, and Tori was asking me about publishing. The self-publishing thing is a very interesting trip because not knowing how to write a book, not knowing what the format was supposed to be in, not knowing who or what you do, I picked Author House only because their reputation was pretty good. So I went to them, and it took me several drafts to get it set up for publishing, for their format. And of course, when you self-publish, it means that they aren't editing it, they aren't doing anything. Whatever you send to them, that's it. So I had to have friends edit it, read it, and go through the whole process. But I went ahead and decided to have it printed. And I have probably about 20 books left. And I know that I think it's still available on Amazon the last time I looked. So anyway, once that went out, it helped a lot, and I started getting a lot more questions from people about, what do you do when your father's wringing his hands? What do you do when your mother kicks you and sticks her tongue out and she's 6 years old again? They were asking me all these questions. So during this whole 11 to 12 years, I journal, which anybody who's in the caregiving, I recommend journaling. And if you put it on a computer, just password protect it so no one can get into it. Because you can write your own thoughts, whether they're good, bad, indifferent, frustrated. The world is just terrible that day. You can let all of that out. So I do recommend journaling. And during all this time when I was journaling, I have a cousin who lives in Texas, and we're very, very close. I emailed every day. So I had 11, 12 years of emails. I had all my journals. And after my parents passed away, I had people going, why don't you put this all in a book? And for me, not being a writer, it was a really daunting task because I don't even know where to start to do this. So I researched, found out about the formatting and how it needed to go. So I pulled all the emails, all the journals, and just started writing. And that's why it's in a diary format, is because I wanted it to follow along with what was going on in my life during that time. So I got it all together, had it all into a book format, had it edited by several friends, and put it all together. Did my research, because when you send a manuscript out to publishers, you need to have your cover letter that goes with it. And at the time, I had all my documentation of how many Alzheimer's dementia cases there were in the United States at that time, how many estimated caregivers there were. I had all of my ducks in a row, I thought. I sent my book out to probably 200 publishers across the United States, and I got just a few responses back of no, it's not our genre. We're not interested. So I just took the book, stuffed it on a shelf, decided to just forget about it totally. So for the next couple of years, my husband's health was kind of failing, so I was working human resource coordinator for a local manufacturing facility. So I decided to go ahead and retire early. Because I'd been through it with my mom and dad and my husband, and we're on a farm, and I didn't want to wait 5 years and something happened to him, and I wasn't there for him. So I went ahead and retired, started to build my retirement life of doing different things when, in the spring of last year, I got a phone call. And this woman says, "Hi, this is Rochelle from Tate Publishing," and I'm thinking, okay. And she goes, "Well, we would like to offer you a contract for your book," and I went, "Did you read it?" She starts laughing and she goes, "Yeah, we did read it." And I said, "Okay, why?" I mean, I'm very leery. I'm asking I'd already done the self-publishing, so I'm like, and how many thousands of dollars is this going to cost me? This is all going through my head. She goes, "No, actually, one of our editors, we got your manuscript a couple years ago. They all get saved and put into wherever they hide them or save them or vault them or whatever. And she started taking care of her grandmother, and she remembered my manuscript from a couple years before, so she pulled my manuscript and read it. So they called and offered me a contract." And it was just like, oh my word. I mean, I was just totally, okay, now what? So needless to say, they send you a contract. I had to contact the attorney, my attorney. "Please read the contract, tell me, is this legitimate? Is it not legitimate? What do I need to do?" Well, he's not a book agent, so he had to contact a book agent out of Chicago to figure out, you know, was the contract okay? Was everything viable? So long story short, we went with it. And my husband was a little shocked, let's say, because we live on a farm in Riverside and I'm going to get a book published. So, you know, I was just kind of like, okay. So it's a long process going through the publishing, because first they have to do the cover and you have to pick the cover, and then you have to go through the process of they wanted to add a picture, and then they want to do a little bit of the change of the formatting. So it goes through stages, and they notify you every stage that you're going through, and you have to sign off and approve that that's what you want done. So the sad part of it is we knew that they were wanting to put the book out sometime in the fall, but I hadn't really talked to anybody to find out what was going on. Unfortunately, my husband passed away last September 11th, massive heart attack. And 2 weeks after he passed away, Tate Publishing calls and says, "Okay, we want to get the book out by the middle of October." And I'm going, not going to happen. Not even going to happen at all. So I explained the situation to them. They said, "Fine, we'll just wait until February of 2015 before we release it." So at least my husband got to know it was going to be published and it was going to go out. So it did. Tate Publishing put it out February 3rd of this year. So the rest is history. It has hit a few of the bookstores. I do have a website that you can go into and look at. It's on the little bookmark part of it. I didn't write this to become an overnight sensation or make a lot of money. I wrote this to get help out to everybody. If I could have found a book, anything close to this, when I was taking care of my brother and my mom and my dad, I would have danced a jig, because it would have answered a lot of questions. I did a lot of research. Hospice is phenomenal with a lot of their information that they have. I was on the internet searching, and the other reason that it was written, not only because my family and friends wanted me to do it, was there just wasn't a lot of mainstream books out there for everyone. Everything that's out there is written by professionals. And yes, you can be a doctor, a neurologist, family practitioner, and you write about the stages of either senility, dementia, or Alzheimer's. But they aren't living it 24/7. And the frustration level and the anger and all the other stuff that goes with it. So I wanted something out there that gave you a perspective of what day to day, because if you've read the book, what my dad went through and all the things I learned with my dad did not work for my mother. Everything I thought I had pat down with Dad, when Mom started down that road, I thought, well, this is good. I've already got a lot of this figured out. It'll work. Yeah, it didn't. My mother was totally different than my dad during hers. My mother became more childlike, where my dad wasn't so childlike, but Mom was just totally different than the two of them. So it just made, I wanted to write the book. I wanted everybody to have an opportunity to see it from another perspective, a caregiver. And one of the things I put through the book, the theme of, I treated my parents the way I wanted to be treated. And I'm really fortunate. I was very, very close to my parents. And I know a lot of people aren't close to their parents or whoever they're taking care of. And it makes it a lot harder. You don't have the patience or that depth of love that you do for someone that you do care a great deal about. So I know there's a lot of people that can't do it. But mine was written from the perspective of, my parents took care of me for 18 years. I felt I needed to take care of them. And I wanted to. I mean, there was just no hands down. I could have done the nursing home a lot sooner, but I didn't want to. I wanted them to enjoy a life at home for as long as they possibly could. And the universe works in mysterious ways. My dad was continually getting worse and worse, and finally he fell at home, and I couldn't get him up any longer. I couldn't pick him up, so I had to call the ambulance, and we took him to the hospital, and at that point then the doctor said he cannot return home. So the decision was made for me at that point. So then I had to go on the hunt to find a nursing home that would take care of my father the way I wanted him to be taken care of. Fortunately for me, I did. I found a great nursing home for my dad. So all along the way, it is like you have, whether your religious beliefs are an organized religion or you're just a spiritual person or whatever it may be, if you put your trust out there, everything just kind of falls into place. It takes care of it. Things present themselves to you when you need them. So I was very, very fortunate on that part of it. But I would do it again. I would do it over and over again because it was frustration. And Tori and I were talking about earlier, when you're working a full-time job, we had farming, and my parents are next door, and I still have all mine. I'm traveling for work and doing things. And I look back now, and I have no idea how I did it. You just put one foot in front of the other and you just do it. Now at the age I am now, I don't know that I could, but I could then. So it helps a lot. So, but that's how the book came about, and that's how the book all started. So have you read the book at all yet? None of you, okay. Very good, then we'll start. Oh yeah, this is from various book readings, and I've grabbed several of them. So in the first chapter, it's about my brother. And I titled the chapter Bob. And I would like to start this story by saying my brother Bob called me to go out to eat or meet him for coffee or just to talk. Instead, I found myself screaming at him in a hospital room. His doctor had called me to tell me the ambulance had brought him in with an alcohol level 4 times the legal limit. Yes, he should have died from alcohol poisoning. Bob also had congestive heart failure and had had open heart surgery in the 1980s. He was on numerous medications, including Coumadin, and alcohol and Coumadin do not mix, causing either a high risk of bleeding or chronic use can have the opposite effect, making the Coumadin less effective by increasing risk of blood clots and risk of gastrointestinal bleeding. What set off this binge of drinking the night before, I'll never know. Prior to his hospitalization, he had worked until he was physically unable. He had tried to get help with Social Security disability and housing assistance without success. I was paying his rent, buying his food to keep him off the streets. He did appreciate my helping. He told me numerous times if it wasn't for me helping, he would be living under a bridge. It wasn't his fault that he was physically unable to work and he needed the help. None of us know what life lessons we have to learn or the lessons we teach each other. I attended most of his medical appointments to keep his medications straight and to adjust the Coumadin because of his drinking. I set up his pill box every week so he knew which pills to take when. I tried to help him follow doctor's orders, but we all know how well it goes when siblings tell each other what to do. It doesn't go very well. We were doing the best we could for the moment. This particular health event landed Bob in the psychiatric ward. I stood in his room yelling at him that he would end up a lonely old man dying alone in his room and no one would know. I asked him why he insisted on sabotaging his life and putting himself at risk. I told him if he continued, I would stop supporting him and he could live on the street and die there. I was so angry with him and so upset what he was doing to himself. Bob was so stunned by my outburst that he had tears in his eyes, as I do not normally blow up, and so he was shocked. We talked for a long time, and he agreed he would get treatment and help to change his life. He knew I loved him so much, and this time his actions were hurting me. The entire energy in the room changed, and we both felt much better. For an hour or so, we talked and talked about the future and his possible choices. My brother was a very talented leather artist. His saddles, leather pictures, bags, and billfolds had won awards when he lived in Nebraska. An issue with the artwork was familiar tremors that are hereditary, and Bob's hands now shook so bad he was unable to use his tools. The tremors also caused depression, and when he drank for depression, he also realized his hands did not shake as much. I think this cycle of depression then drinking, so his hands did not shake so much, and drinking more created the alcoholism. Once he was in the cycle, he could not get out and did not know how to get out and probably didn't want to get out. June 2000, the doctors arranged a psych hearing to go over Bob's past hospitalizations, health condition, and mental condition. If you've never sat through this type of hearing, hold on to your seat. The discussion is very technical with lots of medical terminology thrown in for good measure. I did ask for clarification, and one of the doctors was very good explaining in layman's terms for me so I could follow the conversation. It was decided that Bob was a danger to himself with his drinking and heart condition. We decided he needed to stay in as inpatient and go through their therapy program to give him the opportunity to make some changes. I explained all this to him later, and he was not happy with me, but once we discussed it over and over, he understood that he really didn't have a choice. In hindsight, I think he finally agreed so I would stop talking to him about his drinking and what a danger he was to himself. The doctor scheduled more tests and then set up his therapy sessions. I was allowed to sign him out of the ward and take him outside to smoke and have a change of scenery. He looked forward to me coming every afternoon, rain or shine, we went outside. Just getting outside helped change his mood for the day, as it would anybody who was locked inside. We did spend a lot of time just talking. He did have a lot of mood swings during his hospitalization. I never asked what went on in the therapy sessions. I always thought if he wanted to talk about them, he would. I was not going to pry. I'm not sure I wanted to know everything about Bob. Bob was very private and rarely shared his feelings, so I did not push. In July, the afternoon progressed and we were in a good place talking about the future and what he wanted to do. The doctor came into the room, and we knew in an instant that the news was not good. Bob had bronchial cancer. It was such a shock to us, but it also explained why he became so winded walking any distance or climbing stairs. He had thought it was because of his heart condition. He had had x-rays a few months before to find out why he had such difficulty breathing, but nothing was found. The x-rays had not been taken for his bronchial tubes, just his lungs. Once the testing was finished, we were told it was stage 3 cancer. He was a candidate for radiation, but not chemotherapy because of his heart. Bob and I talked a long time about the options. He was told even with radiation, more damage to his heart was likely, but chances of killing the tumor were good. Bob made the decision to go with the radiation and take his chances. I remember him smiling up at me and telling me he was going to beat this. I was not so sure about the radiation and damaging his heart further. On the other hand, the cancer would kill him. I took a step back and let him make the decision once I told him my opinion. This was his life, not mine, and whatever he chose to do, I would back him. I cannot imagine what must have gone through his mind as he thought this through. Bob was always a fighter, and when he set his mind to doing something, no one or anything could stop him. This was no different as far as he was concerned. My first experience as a caregiver began. The social worker at the hospital stopped by and asked if we needed any help with any legal forms, and she explained about the power of attorney, medical power of attorney, and the DNR, the Do Not Resuscitate Order. She was a wonderful resource for us, and yes, we had her compile all the forms we would need for us to sign and notarize them. We knew we were now prepared legally for what was to come, and Bob felt much better as he knew I would make decisions for him if he couldn't. He also knew I would do what he wanted me to. I took Bob home 13 days after being admitted. We scheduled follow-up appointments and irradiation appointments. On the way home, we rented a wheelchair. Our journey began, and we had no idea how life-changing this trip would be for both of us. So that was in July of 2000, and he passed away in June of 2001. So with him, it was an interesting trip because he was in and out of the hospital numerous times, and a couple of times we just about lost him. Hospice was there for us all the way. They came and introduced themselves to us, and we had hospice come in. And my brother Bob was very private. He didn't really share his feelings with people. He didn't trust easily, and that's where I think ours came from. My brother taught me unconditional love, hands down. And he trusted me at the end with everything. I'd never known my brother to ever trust. But it also puts you in the spot of this person trusts you so much to make all these decisions, and you're just hoping and praying you're making the right decisions because they're trusting you so much. But one of the stories I have in the book, a few months before my brother passed away, I came to his apartment after work because I would stop on my morning before going to work and run over at noon and then stop at night. And I walked in, and he was in a really good mood. And he just watched a program on one of the satellite channels, I don't know if it was History Discovery. And it was about this little boy in Canada who had cancer. And he golfed all the time, and he had gone into remission. And so he had gone out golfing, and he always used a quarter to put on the ground for where his ball was to mark his ball. So, long story, they're short, the boy passes away. A year later, the family decides that they're going to have a family reunion, and several of the family members decide they're going to stop at the cemetery and just visit the boy's grave. So one couple stops, and they come back to their car, and on the headrest of their car are 3 quarters. And they're laughing, thinking, oh, one of the kids is playing a joke on us, you know, whatever. So they drive on to the family home. Well, at the family home, they're overhearing conversations of the other people that are there of saying, yeah, I keep finding quarters. Or I find a quarter over here. They finally realized it was the little boy sending them messages of the quarters. I'm okay. I'm good. I just want you all to know. And that's how the family interpreted the quarters. So my brother says to me, he goes, well, after I'm gone, because he loved the Wild West, anything to do with the Wild West. And he goes, after I'm gone, if you come into a room and there's an old shotgun or something leaning against a wall, you'll know I'm saying hi. And I'm going, well, I don't think you can do that, but good luck. I'm not real sure. But he all of a sudden, I think he had a glimmer of life after death, or that there was something beyond this. I mean, his whole demeanor changed after that. So we had a lot of conversations, you know, about crossing over, about, you know, what could be there, you know, what your life had been. And as time went on, as it grew closer for him that he was going to pass away, I would catch him staring off in a corner, and he would go, I would ask him what he's doing, and he goes, I can see a cabin over there. And I'm going, you can? And he'd tell me how beautiful it was. And he goes, that's where I'm going. And I'd go, okay. And a couple of weeks before he died, he goes, I'm going to go on a fishing trip. And I said, you are? Do you need me to help you get stuff ready? And he goes, no. He says, I think I can do it by myself. And I said, well, when are you going to go? And he goes, in a couple of weeks. And as the last weekend he was alive, he was bedridden the entire time. He did look off in the corner a lot, and he kept saying, can you see it? Can you see it? That's where I'm going. And then he passed away the following Monday after that. So it left me feeling like that he had some peace and solace when he passed. So the thing with him was, I had to go and clean his apartment out, of course. And I took a couple people with me to help, and I was vacuuming, and I vacuumed up bobby pin and some other stuff, and I was joking and going, oh, he must have had a girlfriend in the apartment, and I didn't know about him. So I just blew it off. And a few weeks later, I was talking to my mother, and she said every once in a while she would hear her name, and she would think it was Bobby standing behind her, but she would turn around, and of course he's not there. So I was upset because I'm going, well, why aren't you getting a hold of me if you're going to contact anybody? So I'm cleaning my house. I don't own bobby pins. I pick up the rug in front of the patio door to shake it, and there lays a brand new bobby pin. And I pick it up, and I'm going, I don't own any bobby pins. And it just hit me that it was Bobby. So you can call me crazy, whatever. For the next several years after that, whenever I was going through a really hard time, a bobby pin would show up, wherever it was. And 2 of the most significant ones were, I'd worked at the facility for almost 25 years, in and out of the bathroom all the time. And there's women who work there, but I've never seen a bobby pin on the floor in the bathroom. And my dad was having a really rough time. I went in to go to the restroom, and there laid a bobby pin. And I'm going, okay, Bobby, got it. So I picked the bobby pin up and kept it. And the other one that was most significant was after my father passed away. I was at Hobby Lobby, went out to get a shadow box to put Dad's military stuff in. And Hobby Lobby has lots of aisles, and I'm carrying shadow boxes. And I turned to walk down one, and on the floor lays 2 bobby pins connected together like this. And it was like, okay, I know it's Dad and Bob, and I'm good. So it's those, call me crazy, they did happen. I do believe in them. I firmly. So after Bobby passed away, the depression hit me really hard. Hospice was phenomenal with me for the aftercare part of it. I never understood depression until that point, and I was in the bottom of an abyss, and I didn't want anybody pulling me out. Just leave me alone. I want to stay down here. So I now have an understanding of depression, which I never had before. And but after that, then I started to notice the signs with my parents and my dad. Confusion about, I would ask him to hand me a tool like a screwdriver, and he would hand me a pair of pliers. And that's when I began to realize Dad was having a hard time understanding. So it just kept on going on down, but I'll read you a little bit of, I'm watching the clock too. We'll pick, as you say, I have a lot of things marked. Oh, this one you're going to laugh at. This is a funny one. We did have a lot of laughs because you had to laugh. You can't cry when these things are going on. This is January '04. It was my parents' 66th wedding anniversary. And I took over flowers and cards and cooked a huge meal for all of us. That morning when I got to the folks, I saw the screen from Dad's bedroom lying on the ground outside. And I'm thinking, did he go outside last night? I never did find an answer to that question. Dad is agitated. He can't find his billfold again. I do our hide-and-seek game and find his razor in the hall closet, his billfold tucked in a drawer. I found bobby pins while cleaning, so I know Bobby's sending his message to me again, and that helps a great deal. One morning I went over after breakfast, and I found a set of teeth in the wastebasket. I asked Dad about it, and he said he found them outside when he was talking to the neighbor that's trying to throw him off of his land. I took the teeth out of the wastebasket, and I wondered if they were his second set of teeth that we couldn't find. I also had to talk to him about the man who's trying to throw him off his land. In the meantime, Mom gets up, and she wants to know where her teeth are. I start laughing. It's better than tears. I go into her bathroom, and all of her drawers are open, and everything is lying on the floor. Apparently, Dad had been in there during the night, but he did not want to wake up Mom. I got her bathroom put back together, got her teeth cleaned and back in her mouth where they belonged. She was happy to have her teeth, and I don't think she ever realized where they had been, and that's a good thing. Snow and cold, I bundle up in coveralls and a couple layers underneath, boots, hat, and 2 pairs of gloves to walk back and forth to the folks. It's easier to walk than start the car and drive in blowing snow and winds. It's cold, but the exercise is good for me, and that's what I tell myself. Dad had a bad night on the 4th. Mom calls in the morning to tell me that his room is a mess. I expect the usual, but I get a surprise. He has upset the bookcase full of books, broken a wooden chair, pictures off the wall, and I'm shocked that he physically can still do all of this. Dad said he was trying to get to the attic, and I explained to him there is no attic. They live in a double-wide trailer, no upstairs, no basement. He's having trouble talking, and I realize he has Mom's dentures in. Mom is upset and crying. Dad's upset and shouting. I hug Dad and tell him I love him, get his breakfast, and calm Mom down and tell her I'll fix it all. I get the room back in order, and their day continues. Everyone calms down, everything falls into place, and an hour later, no one remembers any of it happening. A lady just came in. I know Dad has a good day when he says, "Hi, sweetheart," and I love those nights when I walk in and he says that. I cherish the days when they are both doing well and their world is going as planned. On the 9th, Dad called and said there was a strange woman in his house and she wants to marry him. When I get there, Dad has no idea who Mom is or why she's there. He takes a while to convince him that she is Sadie. Pictures help a lot for him to follow the age process. I have to remember he thinks he's young, and this elderly lady sitting in the living room cannot possibly be his wife. Dad wants to go home to Washington to see Sadie. They sold their house in Washington in 1999, but for Dad, that is home. I have to explain that they sold their house, moved to our farm to live next to us. It always takes time to bring Dad back around to the here and now. Sometimes he feels very bad that he was so mixed up. On the 20th, a lady from Elder Services met us at the folks. I had called asking for suggestions on services they offered. They suggested Lifeline, which is a call to Mercy Hospital when the button is pushed. They also offer services to have someone come in a couple times a day to check on the folks if I'm out of town. Since we live in rural Iowa, there's not a lot of services they can offer. Lots of snow and cold for the month, which makes all of us want spring. I really don't like driving on all the ice and snow. The weather depresses the folks sitting inside every day. So that's just a taste of what would happen at Mom and Dad's. It was always an adventure. Walk in, and I just never knew what I was going to find, if it was going to be a good day or a bad day, or things were going to be upset. But one of the funny stories I do tell, Dad had a little bench in front of his window in his bedroom, and I went over one morning and another time, and the screen was laying on the ground, and Dad's sitting there with his back. Well, I'm going to start laughing on this one. So I creep up to the window real quiet, and I went, Raymond? And Dad stops, and he's looking around, and I went, Raymond? And he's looking, and he's kind of turning, and I went, Raymond? He goes, yes, God? And I'm dying laughing outside because he really thought, then he turned around and realized I was standing there. But that's one of my fun, I love that story because he really thought somebody was talking to him. So, but there are a lot of services. Elder services helps. For us living in rural Iowa, it made it very difficult. And in the book, there is a chapter that I talk about what the cost is. Because I was up at 4 and I was at work at 6 to cover a shift coming off at 7 in the morning. For me, I couldn't leave and go home and get Mom and Dad, bring them back into Iowa City to a daycare services for them. You know, and then because they would have to be out of there at some point. And with my job in human resources, you might get out at 4, it might be 8 o'clock at night, so you never knew for sure. So those didn't work for us either, being in rural Iowa. So that is one of the things I'd love to see, is more services for the rural communities, but it's very hard to find people. And we did that when we looked for a caregiver, when it got to the point where Mom and Dad were going to need people to come in during the day that Carl and I couldn't be there all the time, and they were progressing. And it took us several tries before we finally found someone that was going to work out, because they have to be compatible with your person. They have to be able to get along. You have to be able to trust them. So it took us about 4 people before we finally found a lady who was retired who wanted to come in and stay. And she was a godsend for me, that I didn't have to worry about Mom and Dad there. So we'll move on a little bit, and then we'll ask some questions with all my little tapes. This is another one about Dad. This is a year later, on their 67th anniversary. The year starts out icy, and walking back and forth to the folks can be an interesting walk. I had to walk like a duck to get across the driveway and then crunch the grass as I walk through the yard. Sometimes winter wind is blowing so hard that my face feels like it's froze by the time I get there. I even have on my face-covered hat, gloves, insulated coveralls, boots, cover the rest of me, and sometimes it still feels like the wind goes right through me. Dad starts January with wanting some money. He doesn't think he has any. He thinks he has to pay the bills and pay for his room and board. He empties his billfold and hides everything in it, and then we go on a hunt to find it all again. I give him dollars, but those go missing too. So I started giving him play money. He thinks it's okay with that. To him, it's real money. Solves the problem, and everyone's happy. Dad continues his night adventures of thinking he has been out of state and all of his clothes are gone. Or he hid out overnight and the sheriff is coming for him. I always wonder what my dad did in his younger years. Sometimes he thinks he's walked all night and he's tired. Whatever his journey was during the night, we talk about it and I ask him questions and he fills me in. If he's agitated, I tell him that no one is coming for him and I will take care of it. Or I'll get his clothes and put him back to bed to rest since he walked all night. I know some school of thought is to bring them back to reality so they are here in the now. From my experience with my dad, that doesn't work. In the early stages, I could bring him back to the here and now, but once the disease progressed, I found it was much better to just ask questions. Be the protector so they feel safe. Just take care of the problem they're having. Once he feels comfortable and safe, he moves forward again in our reality. He has times when he knows he's having issues remembering everyone and what's going on. When that happens, he becomes very depressed and tells me he wants to die and go see his mother. He will ask Mom to forgive him and ask me to forgive him. We give him lots of reassurance and love him, and we understand. Mom lives with him 24/7, and the stress level for her is getting higher. Her advantage, if we choose to look at it that way, is her short-term memory loss. If she gets upset with Dad for something within an hour, she's forgotten it, what he did, and just moves on. On the days Dad has clear memory, it's wonderful. His face lights up when he talks and his eyes sparkle. His good days help Mom too. She will feel like reading or sewing and she's in a good mood. The dementia is progressing to a point where Dad can't get the words out that he wants to use, and he gets very frustrated when he wants to tell us something but he can't. I usually sit with him and hold his hand and start asking simple questions to figure out what he wants to say. I can always tell when his frustration level is getting high. He'll sit in the chair and ball up his fists up. I know at that point he's getting angry and I need to diffuse the anger as quickly as possible. Funny story, Dad was washing dishes and he finished, but he forgot to turn off the water and the sink had the stopper in it. Yes, water flowed everywhere and they called me to come over. Water was all over the counter, kitchen floor, and it flowed under the wall into Dad's bathroom. I'm grabbing towels to mop up all the water, picking up rugs, everything else that is soaked. Mom is standing right beside me, and whatever I touch, she has to touch too. I lay the towel down, she picks it up, and then she lays it down again. I ask her to move out of my way, but apparently she didn't hear me or she chose not to, and I have to start laughing. Laughter makes everything so much better. The mess does get cleaned up and fans dry everything. After that episode, Dad decided he wanted to quit his job. I told him he was retired already, and he told me he went to work every day and did his job, but he didn't want to do it anymore. I figured out that he thought his job was doing the chores around the house. I had to explain that he was retired and he lived in his house. He took care of his wife by doing the dishes and taking the trash out and sweeping the floor. He wasn't too sure, asked if he was going to get a paycheck for doing this work. So you just have to laugh. So the book is filled with lots of these kind of stories, the funny ones and the frustrated ones, and it's just my way of anybody who is taking care of someone, you can't take it seriously. You have to just work with them, be with them. And I think one of the hardest things I've heard from several people is when they forget your name. Some friends take it very personal when their parent doesn't know their name anymore. They feel like their parent doesn't love them, doesn't want anything to do with them. And I always try to explain it. They know who you are. They know that face. It's just their mind is not connecting the name. But they love you, and they still know who you are. You have to, I guess the best way is you have to let your ego go. It's not about you anymore. It is about your parent or your husband or your wife. It's about that person. You have to step back and let your ego just go away, because they still love you, and they are going to have clear days. My dad, whoever Tom was in my dad's life, I love that man. My dad's progression is it got worse. The mornings Dad would go, "Hi, Tom, how are you?" I knew Dad was going to have a great day. So whoever Tom was, thank goodness. And I'd go, "I'm doing good." We'd just go along. And so there were, once in a while he'd call me a different name, Butch, a couple times. And I was like, I don't know who Butch is, but okay. So, and then every once in a while, then he would come back and he'd know who I was. And that was the really great days. But in the nursing home I picked was great. They were phenomenal with him. He was Houdini at the nursing home. They had him, with the alarms all around the bed and, the cushions, and they had the bed clear down. And if he moved anywhere in bed, the alarms would all go off. And they had the little bumper thing all the way around. Now you got to remember, my father didn't walk any longer. He was wheelchair bound. The man did not walk. He got out of bed anyway. And he'd be sitting on the floor, just waiting for somebody. The alarms are all going off. The girls would walk in and Dad would sit there and go, "What took you so long?" And he didn't talk a whole lot, but it was just, I never could figure out. I always wanted to put a camera in his room, we all did, to just see how he was getting out of the bed and getting around all the alarms. And I just can't imagine how he did all of it, but he did. But the nursing home was really, really good. Anything that happened, they called me, no matter what. So I'm going to leave a little bit of time for questions. But one of the things that's very interesting, my parents were married. They were they never went with anybody else but them, the two of them. So they were joined at the hip. And February 1st, 2011, if you all remember, that was the blizzard that hit. And they shut down all the highways and everything else. We were over at the nursing home and the snow was coming in. And they were saying they were closing highways, people go home. So one of the hospice nurses was there, and I said to her, "If Dad goes tonight, don't you dare get in the car and come over here. Not on bad roads. Don't even think about it." So we left. It was snowing so terrible. And I went in and I hugged Dad. And of course, all week long I've been saying, Daddy, it's okay. You can go. It's fine. We'll take care of Mom. You go. It's great. And we got home probably about 5:30, 7 o'clock they called. He was gone. So this was my dad's joke on all of us. It was a blizzard. He had to stay in the nursing home for 24 hours because the funeral home couldn't come pick him up. So that was, I can hear my dad telling this story over and over again. And yeah, they had to leave me there. So it was like, oh my gosh, Dad, you picked such a great day to go. I mean, it was just snowstorm. And then you talk about people passing away from a broken heart, and that was my mom. My mother passed 17 days later. After Dad passed away, she kept every day, why hasn't Dad come back and got me? And I'm going, when it happens, it'll be, when the time's right. My mother was not ill. They called me. I'd been down to have supper with her on a Wednesday night. The next morning, the girls called me at work and said, you need to come. Your mother's lungs are filling with fluid. She can hardly breathe. We have hospice here. The doctor's coming. And my mother was gone by the next morning. And I do know my mom died of a broken heart. And I know it now because after losing my husband, your heart physically hurts after you lose someone. So I do know that that's what she was going to be with him. So I'm going to leave room for a question and answer. So have at it.
As far as the dementia, is it common to get hallucinations or?
Yeah. The hallucinations come with I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse. With my experience with my parents, the hallucinations do come as the dementia progresses because they're kind of walking between our reality and the reality of their head. And so yes, the hallucinations will come. My dad had great hallucinations, and we called them story time. I did not ever want him not to tell me about him. So when he would tell me he'd been on the train all night, and there were bears on the train, I'd go, oh, what kind of train was it, Dad? What kind of a bear was it? I mean, I wanted him to tell me the stories. I did not want him to close off. Because can you imagine in your head, you think you've really done this and nobody will believe you or talk to you about it? I can't imagine that horror of being trapped in your head and you can't tell anybody. So Dad had a lot of hallucinations, and as the dementia progressed, the hallucinations got, sometimes even more and more violent. And one of the things I noticed as the hallucinations got more, anything he saw on TV he thought was happening in real life. If there was a gun battle going on, he'd get up and go look outside to the window because he thought for sure they were outside shooting guns. So you have to deal with each one of them on where their reality is. And Dad would think he was talking to, all my family is deceased. My brothers, my sister, everybody's gone. And Dad would say, the boys came to see him. And I would always, how are they? I don't know. Did they come see him? I don't have a clue. But I wasn't going to tell him that they weren't there. So yeah, if they're having hallucinations, is this someone in your family?
It's a relative.
My sister.
Okay. The hallucinations, whether it's senility, dementia, or Alzheimer's, I mean, they're all family of each other. And it will, because as their mind lets go of our reality, then all the other things start in. And it's just part of it. There's not a lot.
I wonder if women react to the storytelling more than a man would. Because we were mothers,
And could be.
To extend the story and kind of ask.
Well, yes, because we're going to ask those questions, true. There is a difference between men and women telling stories.
Or the caregiver.
Yes.
Like I think about my sister and her husband, I just can't see him trying to extend. I just can't see him trying to.
True, you are correct. There is a difference because we are storytellers. We do take care and tell stories. We're going to ask the questions. Men probably are not. I can see where you're coming from on that one. I would have to agree, more than likely. Is there anybody else in the family that it helps her?
Not now.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
That would be the second question as far as telling my brother-in-law what form of help is there out there, like with county help or city, different organizations?
In the little book that I gave you, there will be some of that, and and I will hand you one too since you joined us. There are information in there, and since this is such a little tiny group, and none of you have read my book, correct? I'm just going to give you one. I'm just going to give it to you. There's just 4 of you here. I'm going to give you the book, and you just take it home and read it.
Thank you.
I want the word to get out. That is my whole thing. Is I just want people to read it, because it'll answer some questions, and if he reads it, and since it's in a diary form, everybody that's read it so far has come up and said, "Oh my gosh, that's what my mom did, or that's what my dad did, or oh yeah, is that what we should do?" So yes, I will just give you all books.
Well, I have a question and a comment.
Okay.
So I have read the book and immensely enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And I was reflecting that as I was reading it, I definitely had an image of you and your family and how much warmer it is now to have met you. It just completes the picture.
Oh, thank you.
And how wonderful that is to actually meet the author, especially of a personal nonfiction book.
Thank you very much.
So one of my questions was, you often write of your husband, Carl, and that when you had to go out of town, he would become the de facto caregiver.
Correct.
And so I was curious, for you, writing was kind of one of your ways to help make sense of everything. What was Carl's way of helping him as a caregiver?
To deal with this? For Carl, it was a totally different experience. He was not raised in a really warm, connective family. And when we first came together, he was a little apprehensive at the closeness of my family and us talking and how much love we had between each other. And for Carl, I think that we're all here to learn lessons. And I think for Carl, working with my mom and dad and taking care of them, he also learned love, and he learned unconditional love. He adored my father. He just thought my father walked on water. And I think for him, it was a way for him to become the nurturer, the person to care. He did become much more caring, and it reflected in our relationship. I was fortunate that it didn't pull us apart like it does a lot of people. It brought us very close together. And yes, I think for him, I think he appreciated me more after seeing everything I was doing running back and forth. But no, for him, I think for him, it was, he got to feel what a close-knit family, the love part of it was for him. And it showed later in him. He was much more affectionate, much closer. So for us, it was a good thing. I think everything that we do is a learning experience. I think everything that happens to us, good, bad, or indifferent, is something for us to learn from, to change in our life, move forward. I guess what you can see from me, I'm more of a positive person than a negative person. I want to live life thinking positive, that things are going to work well, but we're the ones that can do it. So you just have to laugh a lot, roll your eyes. And yes, I was very frustrated a lot of times. Heaven knows I'm not perfect. And you have to, as a caregiver, you have to take care of yourself too, because you can't take care of anybody else. And I did. I started doing yoga. I did massages every few months. I started doing meditation, even if it was only like 5-10 minutes. When I got really frustrated, and let me tell you, there were times when you are really frustrated, I would just take a deep breath, walk away from mom and dad's house, walk back over to my house, because we were just right across the yard from each other. Just walk it out, and think about it, and okay, take a deep breath. They can't help what they're doing. It's not their fault. They're not doing it on purpose. Take a breath, and then go back in. And it would work, because you just have to. And in a lot of ways, you're no longer the daughter. You are the mom over them. You're now the parent. And so it makes a difference. But would I do it again? In a heartbeat. It was great. It was great for me. I learned unconditional love. I learned patience. I learned that deep, deep caring that you have for people. I learned so much about myself doing this. So I'm thankful for it. So any other questions?
Yeah, you go
I'm sorry, I missed out on the first part, but I was just curious about, and maybe you spoke to this, but how long from, when they were first diagnosed until they passed?
Oh, okay, that's a very good question. I'm trying to remember what year Dad was diagnosed. I did take Dad to the University of Iowa to the geriatric clinic, and they did the tests, and they were the ones that first diagnosed him with it. And I'm going to think, don't quote me on this because I don't remember right off the top of my head, but I'm going to say that was probably in about 2000, 2001, and then he passed in 2011. And Dad did not have the classic Alzheimer's. His was more the dementia part of it. So it was a little slower progress. It wasn't, Carl, my husband's father, had Alzheimer's, and we helped take care of him. And his went much quicker, and he went through all the stages a lot differently than what my dad did. But Dad with the dementia, it was a slower progress. Because he would have really good days where he was just really with it. But the last 7 years of his life were rough. He would really start going downhill. And then the last 4 years of his life, 3.5 years, he couldn't walk, he could hardly talk. He physically just really went down. And now Mom was on the other side of it. Hers was more senility, dementia, and hers probably didn't really start appearing until she was about 85, and she died 5 years later. But hers was a broken heart, I still swear. Hers was a broken heart, but yeah. They were 90 and 95 when they died. So they had a long life. And I also will end up with it probably if they prove that it is hereditary. Both of my parents were there, and on my mom's side, grandmother, aunts, by the time they're 85, the sign that's starting to show up, and they all die in their early 90s. So by then they'll have something.
I just have a question do you feel that patients should know right away that they have a diagnosis of dementia?
My dad was very frustrated. He couldn't understand why. He didn't know that was not a pair of pliers. 5 minutes later, he knew it was a pair of pliers, so why did I think that was a screwdriver? And so yes, when I took him to the university, because he kept coming to me and go like this and go, what's wrong with my head? He knew something was wrong. And I am an advocate of always telling the truth. I want someone to tell me the truth. I don't want them to hide it from me. So we went and did all the testing and told him. Of course, then they had to contact the state of Iowa to take his driver's license away from him, which that's another whole story in itself. And, oh yeah, anger. He was a very angry man for about a week, but he didn't need to be driving. But no, I wanted Dad to know, what was going on with him. And we did try, the Namenda, and there's Aricept, and there's some other drugs out there. We did try, several of them. Unfortunately, they really didn't make much difference with Dad. But if they're asking questions, like why am I not thinking straight, they need to know, in my opinion. Now remember, I'm not a professional.
Was there ever a problem with wandering?
Yes, in the book, you will have this lovely story. That happened with my dad. Fortunately, it was in December. Fortunately, in December, it can be freezing cold and we're all huddled in. This happened to be like a 40, 50 degree day. I didn't realize Dad was missing until it was on a weekend. And I had gotten up and I thought I had heard a car door out in the driveway. But when I looked, I didn't see anything, so I just thought it was my imagination. And I finished what I was doing there, and I took a cup of coffee to walk over to Mom and Dad's. And I get there, Mom's sound asleep, no Dad. Where's Dad? Mom's, I don't know. And we had alarms on the door. When you open up the door, they go off. Mom didn't hear the alarm. So I'm going outside to look around in the garage to see if Dad, because he would go out to the garage to his workshop once in a while. Then the neighbor stops to tell me Dad was out walking on the gravel road, which he did every day. We live on a dead end, and so Dad would walk this little quarter mile back and forth every morning. And Dad had been out walking, and he said he stopped to pick him up, and he said he wanted to talk to Carl. So he dropped him off at our house. Well, Dad never came in the house. So nobody knew where my dad was. So I'm hysterical. My dad's hard of hearing. I'm yelling and screaming. He's not going to hear me. So we take off. We live in the country. We're driving gravel roads. Is he in a ditch? Is he in the timber? We're in between new 218 and old 218. Did he get out to the interstate? The look on your face, I'm just going totally berserk. So I'm calling the sheriff's office while we're looking for him. The sheriff's office calls me back and said, yes, the man at such and such let an elderly gentleman into the house. Thank goodness, we live in the country. Was a neighbor a mile down the road on the old 218, had let Dad in. Dad was so happy to see me, but thank goodness he had his hat on, he had a coat on, he had gloves on, he had boots on. He was dressed for being outside, and it wasn't really cold that day. So, yeah, that was a total panic attack. So what I did then is I made a flyer up with Dad's picture, everything about him, his physical, told him what his dementia. I sent it to every neighbor in a 5-mile radius of my home, saying, if you see my father out walking past our house, please call me or pick him up and bring him home. So, and I sent it to the sheriff's office too so that they would have it. That was my prevention. But Dad never walked away again. He only did it once. Thank goodness. But that's in the book too. So, any other questions?
I have one question. Sure. I've not read the book, and my sister was just diagnosed with terminal cancer. So will this book help me?
It will. My story with my brother.
Okay.
The story of my brother will. We go through the whole thing with his diagnosis, the hospitalizations, what he was feeling, what he was thinking. Yeah, that will. Thank you. You are very welcome.
Thank you again so much, Loretta, for coming and talking to us. That was wonderful.